Okay, call to order the meeting at ASRB on Monday, February the 3rd at 4:34 4:38 p.m., 7 p.m. Close enough. A roll call, please.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Member Middleman, Member Taft,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kamra, and Member Delgavio are noted absent.
You'll make a note if they show up, either one of them. Okay, good, thanks. Do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are no changes to the agenda. You do have one desk item for item number 1, and the project planner will mention that in the presentation.
Okay, thank you. There are no consent agenda items tonight?
Nope.
Wonderful. So we get to jump straight to public hearing, and the one item we have, we have a presentation from staff.
Hello and thank you. This is a conceptual design review project at 5 Woodview Lane. The applicant is proposing to demolish an existing single-family residence and to construct a new single-family residence, detached ADU, as well as a tennis court and a vehicle gate, along with associated site improvements, and also to remodel an existing pool house / ADU and a detached garage. So we have one desk item for tonight from a neighbor of 5 Woodview Lane. To put their concern on record, they're interested in how the expanded home / property will handle drainage as a result of the project. And they stated that they live downhill from the Woodview property. And the neighbors in the past have some problems with water coming downhill onto their properties. And that they're expressing that that they hope that nothing from the new construction would alter that, and that all drainage from the new estate should flow towards Woodview Lane instead of their side, which is Possum Lane. And so we will be working with the applicant during formal design review along with the engineering department. Since the drainage plans are not necessarily required at conceptual design review stage, we'll be working with the applicant to make sure that drainage is not a concern for the other neighbors.
Thank you.
So to give you a brief property description of 5 Woodview Lane, the subject site is 5.54 acres located on Woodview Lane. And so it's this property right here. And it's located at the southern edge of the town of Woodside. The topography of the site extends upward from Woodview Lane to the central portion of the property. And the slope declines from the eastern portion, starting from the back of the main residence all the way to the rear portion of the project site. And as you can see here in the rear portion of the site is heavily wooded. So this is the topographic survey. So the applicant also provided larger survey details, which I'll show here really quickly. So this is just the topographic survey for the left side. This is for the right side. Again, this right portion highlights where the site is most heavily constrained, just with the topography and with the wooded area. This is the bottom southeastern portion of the site. And this is the southwestern portion of the site. So going back to the proposed project, you can see some of the proposed developments. They're changing they're keeping the existing pool and the pool house here, but as noted in the staff report, they are proposing to enlarge this overhang pergola structure here. And they're also proposing for a new cobble outdoor parking area in the rear portion of the main residence, as well as a new sports court, and also an ADU structure at the bottom portion of the site. So this is detailing the landscape plan that they have here. What's existing at the site is a garden that they plan to enlarge towards the setback. And this is detailing the existing pool and the pool house, as well as the proposed paving for the sports court. These are the floor plans for the project site, including the proposed lower main floor plan. This is the proposed upper floor plan. This is the proposed roof plan. This is a floor plan for the proposed ADU. This is the proposed garage roof plan. Again, for the garage, as well as for the pool house, the footprint of the structures itself won't be changed. It's more of a interior remodeling, except for this pergola that's attached to the pool house here, which would be enlarged from what is currently existing. And so as part of the plans, the applicant has also provided renderings of the proposed project, including renderings for the proposed main residence, starting with the north elevation. And this is the east elevation. This would be the south elevation. And this is the proposed west elevation for the main residence. And the renderings are also provided for the garage. This is the north and west. This left is the south elevation, and this would be the east elevation. For the proposed ADU, the applicant has also provided renderings for the north. This is the west elevation. This is the south elevation. This is the ADU east elevation. And so before you, the ASRB, the applicant has provided physical sample materials, which include natural fire-resistant materials, stucco walls, stone base, steel windows, and the stucco would be an earth tone gray, and it will be in the, it would match the community character. And also, the ADU would also have vertical wood siding, metal roofs, stone base, and steel windows. And as detailed in the architectural design statement, going back to the house is oriented with a large opening to the south so that it lets in ample winter sun for warmth, while the steeper summer sun angle will allow for less direct sunlight to enter the house. Also, the house has been sited in a way that the existing trees to the east and west of the house would provide morning and afternoon shading, and that the deep eaves will help with taking advantage of the winter/summer sun angles. And solar panels have been planned for the garage roof as showed in the renderings here. So that concludes my presentation. Staff is happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also on Zoom to answer any questions as well. And the applicant has stated that they installed story poles at the site back in late December. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing is applicants proposing a sports court. It's located within the required side setback. The code is very specific that only tennis courts can go into required side setbacks. Given that this sports court is only about 2,000, a little bit more square feet, whereas tennis courts are roughly at the smallest size, around 7,000, 7,200 square feet. Also, this shows a basketball court. This would not qualify as a tennis court. Therefore, with formal design review, the sports court will either need to be removed or relocated somewhere that meets required setbacks.
Thank you. You preempted my question. Just process then, does the relocation of the sports court, that's something that needs to be resolved in conceptual design review?
It's really just, I think, as part of the overall review of the project, if that's something that the board feels that needs to come back for review, it could. If it's something that is comfortable with staff reviewing, depends what else happens with the rest of the project.
Okay.
But yeah, it could be dealt with. It definitely needs to be addressed at formal design review, whether that's done with staff or ASRB.
Thanks. Okay, does anyone on the board have questions of staff?
Regarding the sports court, if they wanted a variance for it, would the findings be met with the garden being so close to the other setback?
We haven't looked at that. It would be probably difficult to meet the findings, just trying to understand what the unique circumstances of the lot would be, to where something like that could not meet setbacks.
Can you pull your microphone closer?
Works. Works. Thank you, Don. There's a mention that the total floor area, it's on 9. Allowed is 13,000, proposed is 10,000. But then there are comments which I'm not sure I fully understood. So ultimately, there's no exception asked for, right?
The, there's no exception to the total floor area being requested. There is the applicant will need to file for a maximum residence size exception, to go over the 6,000 square feet. But as we may recall, that the residence size exception is just a formula. So it's a matter of what your lot size is, and you plug it in, and it tells you how much square footage you shall get with an exception. The exception itself does not trigger any different process. So that's kind of the one exception that wouldn't trigger planning commission review by itself. That exception just follows whatever the process is for the overall project. So there's no special findings that need to be made. The applicant just needs to demonstrate that they comply with the formula.
So that's 6,000 square feet allowed and proposed 7,800.
That's correct. So that, and that 7814 roughly proposed would be under what is allowed with the exception. So they would have to apply for the exception with their formal design review application, as well as with that application, staff will review all of the floor area calculations in more detail to ensure everything is calculated correctly and compliant.
That 7814 is under the maximum residence size exception.
Correct. Let's, for example, if they exceeded what was allowed by the residence size exception, in that case, they would be applying for a variance.
Thank you.
This is tangent. Why did not just update the allowed residence size?
It's a good question. There are a lot of other things, not a lot, but there's a number of things in the municipal code that are based on the maximum residence size without an exception. And when they were making the change, the town council didn't have the bandwidth to go through the code in all of those different areas to make those changes, and just wanted to clarify we're allowing more square footage for the main residence, but it shouldn't affect other things. Therefore, it was still referred to as the maximum residence size exception.
See, so to save math equation, essentially, maximum residence size on one side for a lot this size is 8,800.
Well, no, in this case, it's the 7893. It's based on the lot
Oh.
size itself.
Fair enough.
But if anything, if the formula exceeded the 8,800, that would be the maximum.
It's a number.
Staying on this topic, I noted that the proposed garage height exceeds the allowed height by 1 foot. Does that require a variance?
So they're showing that as the existing and proposed height. So if the existing, what they do need to do when they get into a building permit is they actually survey the height of the existing. And if it exceeds, that's okay. It's just legal non-conforming. It just means that any work that they do there cannot exceed what's there now. If they were to exceed what's there now, then a variance would be required. But if they're just replacing or keeping it within that same envelope, no variance would be required.
That was in reference, Don, in reference to page 10, right? Setbacks.
Hypothetically, if solar panels were installed on the garage roof, they brought the height up by another foot or so.
Sure. That would not be an issue. So solar panels really just kind of don't fall into that category. So, but it's a very good question because that little technical increase, if it was some other kind of feature, it would impact the height. But for solar panels, something like height and zoning code requirements cannot be applied. It's really based on state law, health and safety issues.
Any other questions for staff?
Just one more clarification. Some of the illustrations, or renderings rather, show gray color. Some of them show what appears to be white. So is it basically just conceptual inaccuracy, or the samples show that?
Yeah, we really should rely on the samples themselves, the renderings, their printed computer colors. I think what we're seeing here is different shadowing, which is showing the lighter and darker colors on the renderings. But it is the main reason why we actually require the samples themselves, because that gives us a better indication of what's being proposed.
Let's get into that detail.
Okay, yeah, so and I think that side there. It's the gray side. The back was just the label.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Otherwise, move on to the applicant. Yes? Yep. All right. That we'll move on to the applicant's presentation.
The applicant is online here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Ken Lindstedt. Thanks for meeting this evening. I'm the architect for the owners at 5 Woodview, and we have our own little presentation here that I thought might help a little bit with understanding the massing of the project. I'm not certain if you've all visited the site, but we do have this photo of the story poles that went up at the existing house. My clients actually, they bought this a few years ago. They actually love the location of the house. They like the way the house currently operates from how you arrive at it with the driveway, how you kind of drive around to the north side and then open up to the views to the south. They are not necessarily in love with the aesthetics of this house, but we did go through an exercise to see if we could remodel this in a way that could achieve the goals of really reaching a little bit more out to the views in this house and actually physically reaching out to the garden. So to that end, rather than remodeling it, we looked at taking the house down, and you may notice in the story pole flags here that we brought the house in. The footprint is now smaller than the existing house, but there's a more vertical orientation to the house, mostly so that we can get the bedrooms that are on the ground floor and put them upstairs and take advantage of the light and the views. So this shows that there's a little bit of kind of bringing it in on the ends, but going a little bit vertical. And we do have some before after renderings just to kind of give you a sense of how this might feel in its current state versus the new massing. They also didn't really want to do too much to this site from kind of a regrading, rethinking standpoint, because their biggest goal was to get more garden around them rather than less, and kind of keep the site in as natural a state as possible right now. So if you go to the next one, this is showing the view from Woodview Lane looking up, just noting that I don't know that anybody can really see this house until you're up at the property itself. Really well screened from neighbors on both sides. The next one. This is just showing the overall site, but the more important one might be the next slide that kind of hones in a little bit on the main house, and highlighted in red is the existing house. And you can see that our footprint has been brought in a little bit, extended a little bit to the south, but for the most part in the existing location. Next one. So this is a series of renderings that we did just to kind of give you a feel for kind of what it's like now and what it'll look like when we've landscaped it with the new form. So what you're seeing here on this driveway is there's a pretty extensive gravel area to the I guess the north of this driveway or to the west of this driveway that you can see in this rendering that we will be taking out and replanting. But up above, you can see the way we've done this is we have red lines. I don't know if you can see that red outline. The red outline is showing where the house will be. And then we do it both ways. When we show you the new look, it's going to show where the house currently is. So here's view one showing what's existing as you drive up. And then the next one shows the proposed. And what you'll notice is like the current house has a tall gable that faces south. And the way we're doing this is we're kind of moving our taller forms to each end and then having a little bit more of a one-story feel to the middle of the house, albeit a taller one-story. And we do have a dormer in that center space, but it's tucked within the roof. And we've painted it the color of the roof so that it really doesn't show up as a form that you necessarily perceive right away. So again, on this one, you're seeing the red line of the existing house, and they're roughly the same as you drive up. So if we go a little further up the hill, which would be the next slide, this is existing, and you can see again, our red outline shows where the new house is going to be, which will be the next one. And again, we're going to do some foreground planting so that we're not just kind of looking straight at the house as we ascend the driveway. This next view should be an aerial view of the existing. And again, keeping the existing driveway circling around to the north. And then the new house with more extensive gardens. The whole idea here is to kind of create these outdoor garden rooms. And so we could pause here for one sec just to talk about the massing. There are a series of two-story forms, but we wanted to kind of have this undulating plan, so to speak, so that not everything is all in one plane. We have some movement in roof forms, and that center portion of the house being a lower plate at that great room allows the house not to just be one solid eave that goes all the way across. We also added these porch elements facing south to help break up the verticality and also to provide some shade for the ground floor. If we go to the next rendering, this is existing house. And you can see the red outlines again. And this is, yep. And then this is showing a kind of a taller expression as you go to the entry. That tall window to the right of the arched door is a library space that has a two-story form in it. And then my clients tend to like symmetry, so we've kind of created a bit of a symmetrical approach to the house between these two flanking forms. We also opted for hipped roofs rather than gable roofs so that the stucco doesn't really reach above the ceiling height, so to speak. Everything kind of stays down at the two-story height rather than going all the way up to the maximum height with a gable. I think that might be the extent of our renderings. Yes. So I wanted to just kind of go through those with you to help you understand the house a little bit more. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the project.
Thank you, Ken. Does anyone on the board have questions of the applicant? Otherwise, I'll start. In the package that was submitted to us and we had the opportunity to review, there were renderings of the remodeled garage, pool house, and ADU as well, which take a very different direction in terms of materials. And I'm just curious if you could speak to your approach there and why you chose to take them in a different direction.
Yeah, it's a great question. There was a desire to have these outbuildings blend a little bit more into the landscape and give them a little less importance than the main house. So, not that they're really reading as barns, but but really the idea was to let them fade into the landscape more. That existing garage right now has some dormers on it and doesn't really kind of have the subservient feel to that we were kind of hoping for. And I do think there's a lot of precedent for a house that maybe has a slight bit more formality to it, and then having the outbuildings kind of be more barn-like or, you know, a little more agrarian, I would say. So we did opt for all of the outbuildings to kind of take that tone and let the house be my clients really kind of like a slightly lighter colored stucco just for the feel of the house.
Okay, thanks.
Lighter color is not really visible much from outside of the property. Is that correct?
Is that a question for?
Yes, the lighter color stucco
Yes.
it's not really like modern barn, but if you maybe can describe the style in more technical terms, is not really visible or not visible much from the street, or is it?
Right. It's not visible from the street. It's visible from the driveway, but not from down at Woodview.
Yes, definitely not from the entrance gate, but from the other side.
And not really from offsite either. I mean, I've driven around and I can't really find a place that you can actually see this property from roads, you know, over across the way or nearby.
So taste differs. So, but if any of the neighbors would ask that question, it's really not should not really bother anyone. That's what I'm driving at.
Sorry, what is the question?
In case any of the neighbors find it objectionable, this here it cannot be the case because it's not really visible,
Right.
and whatever owners prefer, if it's more or less blends with what Woodside considered as the preferred way of blending it into the nature, it seems like these requirements have been satisfied or will be satisfied.
Yeah, I suppose my approach here is to kind of ask the board how they feel about, you know, whether the amount of the lighter stucco that we're presenting here with the kind of more natural materials in the outbuildings is okay given the guidelines. It feels appropriate to me, particularly given all of the amount of screening that's on this property. It may not be appropriate on a site where it's more visible. But this is kind of stylistically an approach that the owners are really fond of. So we're starting with this.
What I'm driving at, I don't see any problem with this because it's not really visible. In many cases, when it is visible, then people neighbors may say that why it's so bright.
Right. Gotcha. Got ya.
Say, I don't really have a problem with the light color so much. There's plenty of houses in Woodside that have a similar tone. When I did visit the site, I did notice that I could see a neighbor from the carport area in the turnaround, and I am concerned a little bit about screening back there in terms of the vegetation, in terms of the landscaping plan. And I'm also slightly concerned, at least in this rendering, I see palm trees and maybe not so many California natives. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Did our landscape architect make it to this meeting? You know, I know the approach to the landscape here. Janelle Hobart is our landscape designer who we've done many, many houses with, and she does have a very strong sense of the California landscape. These palm trees were something that I think is an exception, a little more ornamental, but it's on the side of the house that no one sees. I wouldn't let these palm trees lead you to believe that the house is going to take on this kind of, you know, overly I don't know, Southern California or whatever we want to call it, feel. I think there's precedent for it in Woodside, and I think, but I really can't use the language that the landscape architect could describe to you for this landscape. I don't know if we want to bring up the actual plans and see what the planting is, but I do know that there is a strong desire for California natives.
Then I guess, are you familiar with what I'm referring to about the neighbor that's to the north that you can kind of see through the trees?
Can we find it on is it straight up near where the tennis court is? Or the
Yeah, yeah, like,
just
yeah,
beyond?
I drove around to the garage and then I noticed I could see the neighbor from essentially where I was in front of the garage when I visited the site.
Okay, I mean, our goal would be to make sure that we all have privacy, so I am certain that if there's like a gap that could be seen, that we would be very open to meeting with those neighbors and making sure that we do the proper screening.
Awesome.
There is a fair amount of folks there.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised I saw it. It might be
Yeah.
because it's winter.
There,
Yep,
there appears to be, so on this drawing we're looking at now where it's marked coop, chicken coop, it appears to be a new ADU constructed adjoining that
Oh,
immediately to the,
that's what I saw.
oh, okay.
and
Yeah, the house itself is a little bit kind of further away, right?
Yeah, I will admit I was surprised when I showed up after looking at it from a satellite view that I saw something.
Yeah, that might be a good image right there.
that
Yeah,
new
so the house
structure does not
is
show up.
250 feet from our house. Yeah, that's what I was imagining for the house that we can't really see.
Yeah, but I
You're talking
swear I
about,
saw something. I didn't take a picture, unfortunately, but there's something
Okay.
through this. The
I think
garage.
fairly easy to screen that. I wonder if I might, well, I don't know. Is this the forum for me to ask a question about the tennis court? Since the guidance was to either, sounds like we either make it a tennis court, a real tennis court, or we move it, right? And it's counterintuitive to me a little bit that you could make it a lot bigger and make it a tennis court and move it closer to the property line. There must be a reason for that in Woodside, why a tennis court can get closer, but another,
Sorry to interrupt. These regulations been in place for a really long time.
yeah,
Definitely before the pickleball craze, but meaning more recently, that could be a concern, noise,
Yeah.
for different types of uses, basketballs, just have not been allowed. The code has specifically allowed tennis courts, and we've been down this road on several occasions.
got it.
Not a tennis court, it should not be in the setback. If
Okay.
it is enlarged and made just as a tennis court, you also have to make sure you're complying with all of your paved area standards.
Absolutely. Perfect. We'll address that in the next go round.
So just on this topic though, I do think it's worth getting a revised drawing of the neighboring property showing the proximity of this new structure that's,
Great.
I'm assuming it's within the setback because it doesn't not appear to be too far from the fence.
You saw it too?
Mhm. It's under construction.
Oh, I didn't get a good one.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant? So the existing solar array that's on the property, that will be removed and replaced with solar on the garage?
That's correct.
Is that an expansion or just a same capacity replacement?
I'm not sure about whether it's an expansion or not. I know it's been evaluated by the general contractor and we seem to be doing just fine with it on the garage roof. And we didn't necessarily want it in the landscape.
Oh, that makes sense. Huh?
Related that today, there's I think a proposed seating area near where that existing solar array is. And there are story poles there. Is that?
The
can you
garden, it's
describe
a little-
what kind of structure will that be?
There's a little pergola. I don't know if you can pull up the site plan. There's an existing garden there already. We're just expanding it a little bit for an edible garden, and there's intended to be a small pergola shade structure right there. That's it.
Okay.
Open air.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Member Taft?
Other than the desk item, which may well be in scope for us.
There's also members of the public online that may want to speak.
I think, planning director addressed that item in the opening statement.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify with drainage, it often comes up at the ASRB level. It's good that neighbors bring this stuff up as early as possible. The conceptual design review plans have not been routed to the engineering department. So the way the steps work is it gets the formal design review will be routed to the engineering department. We'll take the preliminary review of the drainage plan. And then ultimately, if the project is approved, we'll go to the construction phase. And then the construction permits also require the detailed drainage calculations, all of which get reviewed by the engineering department and have to meet all the necessary regulations. General rule of thumb, I'm not an engineer and I'll defer to others in the audience or our own staff. But you know, the idea is with a new project, you are not increasing the amount of flow or the velocity of flow coming off of the site. And in most cases, new projects will actually provide a benefit or will reduce the amount of impacts to neighboring properties. Although there's water goes downhill and water will continue to flow off site, but the amount of flow being created by the development itself should be captured on site.
Is that in the municipal code?
It may be partially in the municipal code. There's also state standards that come into play.
I was gonna say, Jim looks
Well, that-
eager to.
Mr. Toby's going to address that question.
Good morning, good evening, I should say. Sage is correct that, you know, as with any project we do at Woodside, you're going to be pretty much reducing the amount of drainage on the property or at least controlling it. So in this case, being the size of the project it is, you're going to have two things we're going to do. We're going to do stormwater detention, it's basically putting the drainage into a larger diameter pipe underground, controlling that water and releasing it slowly over a longer period of time. And on top of that, we're going to do stormwater treatment, which is basically a bioretention swale where we're letting the water filter through kind of a soil mixture that with some hardy plants that filters the water and takes care of any contaminants that might be in it. That all gets released in a very controlled manner. On this particular project, we're not going to be releasing water on Possum, down towards Possum, I should say. It's going to be down towards Mountain or Woodview Lane, down towards where existing is. There's already a catch basin right at the base of the street or the kind of the street that goes right through the middle of the property, eventually down to Portola Road. So it's all going to be very controlled. It's going to be not going to have any negative impact on any of the neighbors. We're not going to propose any drainage to go down to Possum at all. That's a very steep hillside, and the less drainage I can put on that hillside, the better. So.
Good.
Cool.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Any final questions of the app? At that point, we'll move on to public comments. Does anyone in the public wish to make a comment regarding this item? Nobody in the room?
There are no raised hands online.
And just to clarify, for those online, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand virtually. No hands raised.
Okay. With that, I close public comment and we'll move to board discussion. Who'd like to kick us off?
So can make. I think, you know, admittedly, I was surprised to drive to a site that seemed to have a prepared house on it, but it seems that after listening to the presentation, I understand the need for change. I appreciate that the majority of the work is happening on the existing footprints, existing buildings to minimize raising an entire site and changing the entire character of it. I think it's thoughtfully designed. Like I said, I have no concerns around the color palette. Seems to be a very common color palette these days that we've been getting at ASRB. I also thought that the attention to detail for the solar exposure of the buildings with the eaves. Was nice to see. I also looked at the lighting plan that was in the packet. It also seemed undertone. Yeah, I think the only things that I would like to see is, you know, when we look at the screening of the property to the north, Sage, real quick, what is the town policy on landscape design? Is it to stay within California natives, or do we not have any restrictions?
There's not a strict prohibition on non-native plants,
Sure.
but it's definitely encouraged. More ornamental type landscaping is encouraged to be closer to the buildings. As you get closer to the perimeter of the sites, those definitely should be things that, well, they are encouraged to be more native, kind of more organic, non-linear planting, is what's encouraged closer to property lines.
I would encourage California natives because it's nice to protect our ecology here. And the one thing that comes to mind, looking at the gardening plan, I do appreciate the desire for outdoor rooms and utilizing that space. But I believe we're about to be called a very high fire district. And so tempering that with defensible space might be worth a look. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Member Taft?
Not have any questions and any deep concerns. The number of trees which will have to be removed. Can we just clarify that number?
I think it's 26. Is that correct?
There's the detailed report and all of the significant, certainly numbered.
Total of 24 trees.
Hmm?
24?
24.
Yep.
Safe too.
So as far as that number, are there any concerns? I just wanted to make sure that everyone is comfortable with this number.
Anything else?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Yeah, from my perspective, I think, well, first of all, commend the applicant for citing the new structure where the old structure was existing, minimizing the impact, incorporating existing structures by remodeling them, I think is also to be commended. No concerns from my perspective with regard to color palette, and material palette, or the design of the structure itself. I share the concern with Member Taft with regards to the number of trees impacted. It's unfortunate there is that many mature trees on that property. Appreciative. Preserving those would be appreciated. Solar plan at conceptual review is good to see, and the fact that it's replacing an array today that's situated in the landscape. That pretty much summarizes it from my perspective with regards to comments.
One clarifying question on the 24 trees. How many are dead, diseased, or dying? Arborist report. Or is it 24 significant healthy trees?
Does the applicant know the answer to that question offhand?
I could go through this. Hey, Lori, are you available to speak to this at all? Lori's from my office. I don't know if she's got the ability to get on here, but I can tell you that there's one tree that's 24 inches or bigger, an oak, and we're removing that so that the solar array can actually function, or the solar on the garage. The rest of them are are like 15 inches or less. Do you happen to know the numbers on this, Lori?
Hi, yeah. Hi, I work with Ken. Yeah, I did a little breakdown earlier. Let me look at through my notes here. the trees, so 13 of the trees, they're a mixture of blue oaks and coastal live oaks. They're associated with the ADU. So that's the bulk of it. So there's only, I think, 11 that are not associated with the ADU. There are 6 at the parking area, and those are all the sort of new parking area across from the entry of the house. And those are all coast redwoods. There's one at the sport court, but that's one that is definitely in poor condition. And there are 2 behind the garage, and those are to make the solar actually, get sun. And that is actually the only like really big tree, like Ken mentioned. There are 2 at the edible garden, and those are coastal redwoods. And there's one that's kind of in the middle, and that's a live oak, a 10-inch live oak. So really, most of the oaks that we're looking at are 15 inches and smaller, other than that one that Ken mentioned.
And that.
Does that help?
So much. And then I guess my follow on that big tree that's being taken out to support solar, is it in good condition or not?
Sorry, which one?
In this-
The significant tree, the large oak being taken out for solar.
He's
Good
asking us
question.
if it's in good health.
Oh, we should check the report on that. Do you- Yes?
I have it right here. I just need to. It's in pretty good health. It's listed on there as fair to good, and the structural integrity is fair. So that's what we've got from the report.
Would it be a fair ask to ask the applicant to investigate siting the solar on the ADU where they're already taking out a large number of trees?
I think the exposure there might be not as good, but we can.
Sure.
There are
So
also
that's-
more trees around there that we're not taking out. So I feel like it wouldn't get really a lot of sun.
Or maybe to mitigate this, that concern may come up later on. Maybe there's a way to replant if you significant, those trees which are significant, find the place where you can replant for the future. That's, I know that in some jurisdictions, like say around Pebble Beach area, they do that.
Didn't we replant, Lori, like 18 trees?
Yes, we are showing 18 additional trees right now in the landscape plan. I would have to reference the plan to know what they're suggesting though. Or if Janelle's here, she could clarify.
So it would be more reasonable numbers to present later on, yeah?
And just, we'll get more details on that with the formal design review submittal. The landscape plan right now is just kind of very conceptual, it just kind of says new tree. And so we'll get details on the types of trees and sizes being proposed with the formal design review application.
Thank you.
Just saying.
So I'll poll my fellow members here and see how they feel with regards to allowing this project to go forward directly to staff for formal.
Yeah, I would
Getting
feel,
involved from that side. Yes, all right,
we'll make a motion.
all right. With that, I will attempt to formulate a motion.
Sure. Would you like me to summarize the comments?
Yes, please, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
The applicant was commended for providing most of the new construction on already developed areas, most notably the new main residences within the same footprint area of the existing residence. That the board found the materials and colors to provide acceptable color palette. The applicant, and one other thing I'll note, that the applicant was also commended for keeping and remodeling the existing accessory structures as opposed to tearing them down and rebuilding new structures as a kind of a sustainable way to develop those structures. And the applicant has recommended that the applicant provide more screen to the north between the developed area and the new ADU under construction on the adjacent property. And with any screening, to focus on using California natives, preferably drought-tolerant natives. And lastly, there was a comment for the applicant to consider and investigate if there's a way to relocate the proposed solar to a location that would not require the removal of a large oak tree or other native tree.
Okay, I'm going to modify one item, which is in reassessing the size and placement of the sports court, that it's not simply a screening problem, that the proximity and exposure to the new ADU structure to the north be more carefully considered when looking at that sports court placement.
So to clarify, we're looking at when relocating the sports court or modifying the sports court in any way, to consider the impacts that it could create to the neighboring property, and that could reduce those impacts by modification of location and or additional screening.
Yep. My rationale there is that it's not just a visibility issue, there's noise, potential noise. Okay, good. And that, so I'll make a motion that all of those comments be included and that we move forward to formal design review with staff.
Yes, and if for some reason it doesn't appear at this time that there's any planning commission entitlements required, if that is found to be the case with the formal design review application, the planning commission would complete the formal design review.
No, second that.
Sorry, David had a comment?
So clarify, the one question is if a variance would be needed for said sports.
If they were doing a sport, not a tennis court, a specific tennis court, a variance would be required. If they kept it in that location. As it sits today, a variance would be required. They could modify the project so a variance is not required.
Good. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
Member Middleman,
Yes.
Member Taft,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Camera and Member Delgado are noted absent.
Good, thank you.
And just for the benefit of those who submitted desk items and for the applicant, a letter summarizing this action tonight will be sent out to all of those that participated.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And just to close our meeting, do we have any director's report?
No, nothing new to report. Everything I had, I spoke to last week.
Great, thank you. With that, I will adjourn at 5:27 PM. Thanks.